Welcome to this edition of AMPTV Now News.
AMPTV Now News, we are in our season 2, and we have been doing our weekend edition. So welcome to our AMPTV Now News weekend edition. We've been doing our series, and this series we've been talking about has to do with Black History Month, specifically highlighting Dr. Carter G. Woodson. And the reason why we're highlighting him because we think that maybe people can be inspired by his life, inspired by his inspiration, and looking at what he was able to do. In part 1, we recapped the history of who he was, the fact that he was inspired by his father, and both of his parents were former slaves, couldn't read, couldn't write, and yet this man was able to not only get his own self-instructed education from a high school, which he had to work most of the time, and was also had to help his father with farming even prior to that. So it wasn't like he used that as any excuse. And he rightfully could have, don't you think? He rightfully could have used it as an excuse.
Not only that, he graduated at the age of 20. He graduated in less than 2 years, and then he went off and became a principal of the school that he
barely went to.
But
he got his degree,
and then he continued on to get his Bachelor's of Arts degree, and then he continued on to get his Master's degree, MA, and then he went to the most prestigious university in the country and got his PhD in history.
Wow.
Which is Harvard.
Harvard University. And so in the part 1, we recapped on that. So if you missed that, you can take a look at that online, that you're able to go to AMPTV Now News and be able to look at that on our website. If you took a look at the screen, that's where you can find out more information if you missed that episode and all the other past episodes that we had in our season 1. And I also went through some of his books, and the reason why he had to have these books is to re-educate a Negro population that was just coming out of slavery. You had parents that couldn't read or write, so it wasn't like they could really counsel their children on how to be able to get their education correctly. All their parents knew to do the right thing was, you have to get into school, you have to be able to get to college, because then you can get a better job and be better than I was as a slave. That was the mindset.
You know, back then, I'm looking at the mindset, being a teacher, the mindset back then and the mindset of kids back now being in the classroom and also being a teacher. Back then, he had to deal with a lot of not being educated, not having a skills level for reading and writing and math, et cetera, and so forth. Today, we have the challenges are the distractions with the cell phones, the video games, the televisions,
technology,
and the gangs.
We can't down technology, though.
We're not down in technology, but
the
at the same time, if it's abused and over-abused and not going into some of the basic principles of learning, it can be damaging to the children.
Well, as we focus on Dr. Woodson and his life, and some of those quotes we're going to be having some commentary on, and the way he looked at things, I hope that it does inspire maybe a young person that's watching, or a parent that is watching, to be able to instruct their young person on how to do something differently, because it really can be done differently. He was able to look at something differently. He was able to get to the institutionalized racism and say, okay, this can be done so much differently. We can re-educate our community. Here's how I'm going to step in to do it. And he just went about the action plan and just did it. And that's what we're looking at. That's the Carter G. Woodson, the Dr. Carter G. Woodson that we want you to know and to be inspired by. But we really want you to know the man behind the celebration, to know the inspiration that can be done, that anyone can do when you're looking at the background of Dr. Carter G. Woodson. So we're going to finish up on our part 2 through the rest of the program, being able to discuss some more pointers that he had, which I think are relevant to today. You are watching AMPTV Now News Weekend Edition. We'll be right back.
you've been prescribed blood-thinning medication, please pay attention. If you or a loved one took Pradaxa or Xarelto and were hospitalized for internal bleeding, gastrointestinal bleeding, or brain hemorrhaging, or your loved one died, the manufacturers may be to blame. Call the Rely On Group right now to see if you may qualify for substantial compensation and medical expenses. If you or a loved one suffered internal bleeding after taking Pradaxa or Xarelto, call the Rely On Group at 800-219-4517.
Welcome back to AMPTV Now News, our weekend edition. We've been doing a part 1 and part 2, looking at this is February during Black History Month. We were exploring Dr. Carter G. Woodson first to give the inspirational look and the historical reference to him. And the business side that I like about this is the fact that he wrote all these books regardless of what institutional racism, regardless of what the times were. And he was very successful, extremely successful at all the books that he wrote. He wrote also he found a void. This is what I'm looking at from a business perspective. Mm-hmm. He found a void and still was able to fill it no matter the conditions. That tells you that there was still a buyer. There were still consumers that were buying, and they happened to be Black and they happened to be non-Black. So he had both.
Well, he looked at the fact that when he was going through those educational institutions, how he was feeling, and if he has these same problems, how many other African Americans potentially out there would go through the same road and have that similar problems as well. So he found the way in his writing, in his history, in his development to say, okay, how can I enhance somebody else that's going to be coming through these same channels and make it a little bit easier for them? Mm-hmm. And I think that's what's the void that he was wanting to fulfill and filled.
That is I want to say, a very good business model. When you have the passion to help someone else, it seems to be very successful, because when you're successful and passionate about that desire to help someone else, inevitably you'll be helping someone else. That's what we've found. And another different business venture that we were doing, and even if it just helps one person, you know that if it's really motivating that individual, imagine what it can do for others.
You don't get a PhD in history without a passion of
He
reading.
had a purpose to be able to take it to the next
and
step.
not only that, the books and the history, he had a direction of what he wanted to do. And he could take a PhD and just keep writing books and doing all that. No, but he had a purpose that he wanted to accomplish.
Other books that he has written, and the reason why I want to bring these books up is because another way that he helped within his community is got rid of the myths. So one book was about African myths together with proverbs. So that was actual, myths that some of them have a biblical reference. A supplementary reader composed of folk tales from various parts of Africa. That was one way to help educate, again, former slaves, former Black slaves whose roots were from Africa or in the Caribbean. The Negro as a Businessman, joint author with John H. Harmon Jr. and Arnett G. Lindsay, and that was in 1929. The Negro Wage Earner, The Rural Negro, The Miseducation of the Negro. Now that's the book that I read in college. Famous. And that was something originally published in 1933. It was republished in 1972 and also 1977. The Negro Professional Man and the Community, with special emphasis on the physician and the lawyer. The Story of the Negro Retold, the African Background Outlined, African Heroes and Heroines. So you see how he really filled that void in every aspect. He said, I'm going to write about every aspect of my community to help them understand how to recharge, how to rebrand, how to re-educate. And I think that's what the African-American business owner or the person that feels like they're slumped in that job, they have to re-educate themselves on how can I do it differently.
Well, how they can compete How can you compete as an African American in this society, in business, where sometimes you feel that you blocked off? Some African American youth are angry and bitter because they feel that they can't get a job, or they can't perform and be competitive to their other peers that's outside their race or maybe within their race.
Well, I have to stop you there because this is one thing that Dr. Carter G. Woodson, a quote that he did say, as another has well said, to handicap a student by teaching him that his black face is a curse and that a struggle to change his condition is hopeless is the worst sort of lynching. So are we doing that when we are victimizing our youth by telling them it can't be done, or are their jobs really not out there? Or are we not educating, and when I say we, looking at different leaders in the black community that we've seen out there speaking on a national front, who do get paid, by the way, when they speak, are we not doing the right thing by directing them differently, directing them to how to build their own businesses, making sure they are able to get with some mentorship programs, whether it's urban businesses or African-American businesses or just businesses in the neighborhood? I think it's a re-education. That's what I'm thinking when I look at this quote.
When I'm looking at this quote, I'm looking at one, being that you coming in, you got to start all over. People that came before you that supposed to lay a pathway, you have to start back over again. If you understand what I'm saying. The worst form of lynching, meaning physical lynching, is not what he's quoting, understanding your place and your value. And by not understanding your place and value, you find yourself kind of being dehumanized.
I think he's not saying that. I believe he is more so saying that we can't use that
as an excuse.
Another quote he says is, if Negroes are to remain forever removed from the producing atmosphere and the present discrimination continues, there'll be nothing left for them to do. So that's a counteracting.
Well, that's kind of what we're dealing with modernly with our kids now. And that's why they tend to be, I'm saying, in the inner cities going into the gangs and in different cliques, because they find themselves at home or comfortable in that particular environment.
I still want to say leaders in black churches in our community should be helping to direct, because if we're not producers, why are we not producers?
But you have a lot of leaders in directing.
I don't see it.
You don't see the T.G.
No.
Jakes, you don't see the Creflo Dollar,
okay.
You don't see the
on a national front.
Minister Louis Farrakhan. You know.
No,
on a national front.
What I mean is implementation to local communities. So when I see if it's something that is put into our local, and I've talked about this all the time, the churches have a big role when it comes to helping the youth in the community in that aspect, and also in politics, teaching our community, reteaching about politics. We assume that technology is supposed to do all that. We assume that mainstream media is supposed to do that for us as well. But we have to stop assuming and take that into our own hands. And that's something that another Carter G. Woodson quote that I wanted to follow up with, and this is what he said: if the white man wants to hold on to it, let him do so. But the Negro, so far as he is able, should develop and carry out a program of his own. And that's where I'm at. I really believe that we should be carrying out programs of our own. National leaders should be saying that, implementing that, making sure there's a strategic plan and a strategy to do that, including Minister Louis Farrakhan, including the Reverend Jesse Jackson, including Al Sharpton, the people that call themselves a leader, then do just that. Talking about the injustices is not leading. That's just talking.
They have to have the tools to do it. They have to have the resources to do it.
We have the resources.
And
we have experts today. We have really good African American experts that can go into the communities, that are business owners that are very successful. I mean, if we look at Nate Parker, who is, I want to say, one of the actors that's not necessarily one of the top actors that we know, as far as a top billed actor, he was able to step up into a directing, producing role and really went on a limb to do this new movie that's coming out, Birth of a Nation. And so, gosh, we're going to get, after the break, we're going to talk more. We're going to finalize and finish up our part 2. Stay tuned.
When you have credit card debt, the debt suckers' high rate and high pay are everywhere.
Ooh, they're making another minimum payment. Great. Most of the money goes to us. We'll suck the life out of them.
Because your credit card rates are so high, you can't get rid of the debt suckers alone.
Their minimum payments are in vain. No, that's juicy.
But one call to Consolidated Credit can get the debt suckers off your neck.
Thank you for calling Consolidated Credit.
Oh no, they'll lower his rates and consolidate his bills into one low payment. He'll pay off his debt in no time. Consolidated Credit drives us batty.
Call Consolidated Credit now. Call now and get your life back.
Oh, because debt sucks.
Call now.
Call Consolidated Credit at 1-800-290-3129. 1-800-290-3129. That's 1-800-290-3129. Call now.
Warning: if you've been prescribed blood-thinning medication, please pay attention. If you or a loved one took Pradaxa or Xarelto and were hospitalized for internal bleeding, gastrointestinal bleeding, or brain hemorrhaging, or your loved one died, the manufacturers may be to blame. Call the Rely On Group right now to see if you may qualify for substantial compensation and medical expenses. If you or a loved one suffered internal bleeding after taking Pradaxa or Xarelto, call the Rely On Group at 800-219-4517.
And we are back. We are on the last part of our part two, looking at Dr. Carter G. Woodson, and we were profiling his life and also looking at some quotes that relate to business. And I know I was trying to get to my point that I really feel that it is I really feel like the churches and the leaders and the local leaders should be employing the experts that are a part of the community already, employing the resources that are available. We've talked about the resources. We've talked about agriculture, USDA grants. There is that 40 acres and a mule that is already out there. People just need to be directed how to do that. And I really think that's our political leaders, our local political leaders that should be telling the community how to get there.
So you're saying on a national front,
Local.
A local. But if you're looking at local, you got to start at an example at one place and show how
national
it works
leaders should
here.
be okay, but national leaders should be
professing
that.
If you can show it how it works in your own local community and be your own example, and show how that example works, and then spread that example to the next community and the next community. Now you have a platform to really build and have credibility to launch pad yourself
There are
from.
platforms, and so what I guess I'm saying, those national leaders either shouldn't be out there speaking about anything unless they're talking to some of the experts about just that. So going out there and complaining about what America hasn't done and what's not being done, I don't think that helps to get us any further than where we are.
You say national leaders, like which ones? You got some national leaders.
Well, anyone who's complaining about
doing a
it,
great job.
Well,
some
doing a
that's
great
not
job
doing
speaking about a
job.
problem, to me, is not a great job at all. Because if you have to continue to speak about a problem, you're not solving it. You're not getting to the solution.
Well, if they have thousands and thousands of followers and they believing in them and they seeing them,
if we continue just to be reactionary, we're not going to get anywhere.
How can you say that they're not benefiting from
because
something?
the more that in our community, African Americans continue to be reactionary, then we will continue to stay in the same position. If you look at a person like Dr. Claude Anderson that says, stop being reactionary and get involved in politics, I've had this conversation so many times. We can get into this debate and we'll be here for some time. But let me go back to Dr. Carter G. Woodson and some other points. And this came from Madame Noir by Kara Stevens, and she wrote this last year, but it's relative to the Re-Educate to Elevate. And she talked about how Woodson wrote the call to consciousness for the middle-class Black America over 80 years ago. And here's some messaging that she pointed out. How many times have we allowed the promise of title or prestige to keep us from maximizing our financial potential? So, for instance, are we too proud if we're making $1,000 in 8 hours by selling water at an event after Labor Day parade beneath the bridge? Or because I have a BA in psychology, I don't want to do that. Or because I have my degree in anthropology, criminology, that's too beneath me. So that's those isms where we're too up there on those isms that we don't see that as a way of income. Look at this one. How many of us only harness our entrepreneurial spirit during times of unemployment, or underemployment and disengage it once we secure a job. Once we have a job, it's, oh, okay, I can sit back and relax now. Woo, that hardship is over.
Well, they relax, they become complacent, and they don't have that
Edge or drive.
that drive to want to be better and more. They just I know a lot of people in my family are just satisfied with just going to the job, getting a check, and coming home and paying bills.
So then there's no reason to complain. You can't complain about your condition if that's the condition you continue to create unless you get out of your condition. How about this one?
As a mindset.
How many of our family members view our decision to work for ourselves with disdain and scorn?
Quite a few.
Yeah, we've
Quite
talked to individuals that have gone through that, and this is again from Dr. Carter G. Woodson. These are the things that we're talking about. How many of us place more value on working for a large corporation or firm than working for ourselves?
People are trained and mentally to try to do that because in their mind they figure they just go work there, they learn, they have the experience, and they have a check coming in every 2 weeks.
Well, there's
or
a
every
difference.
month.
So if you're a young person and you're getting the experience and you're trying to get into a field and break into that and learn from a business owner, I don't see anything wrong with that.
No, it's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
You have to learn. You have to be willing to be
Got to pay your
teached.
dues. You have to pay your dues.
Got to.
What I see, though, in some of our young people is they go out and they think they can do something and do it better, but yet they've had no experience of doing that particular job or that field.
So they bump their head and bump their head and bump their head.
Keep bumping. We've seen it, and then they come back and said, yeah, hate to say it, but you were right. Nobody ever wants to admit that, at least we're seeing this generation. And I think those are some of the challenges. But as far as family members not being as supportive on individuals that are wanting to have that entrepreneurial spirit, how many people told us, are you sure you want to do that? Well, maybe you should have a job. And that way the job, we know that it's way too hard to work a full-time job and also run a business. You're not going to be as equally successful.
Well, people look at the condition and say, well, you grinding, you trying to get above paying the bills, and getting a job, you can eliminate those kind of pressures because you have a continued income coming in, and then you can work your business on the side. That's very challenging to do because you have
we call that a hobby.
You are a want-to-be.
Yeah, because remember we went through those different types of...
a want-entrepreneur.
A want-entrepreneur, is that what it was?
Yeah, want-entrepreneur.
Even Shark Tank, if you went on that show and you told them, I do this business on the side, I also work a full-time job, how many times have we seen them frown on that?
No, they won't even give you an investment a lot of times because they want their money to be working full-time and sometimes above full-time.
Right. So I think that if you want to be the entrepreneur, you have to take the risk. I know that African Americans that we've talked to, and even when we look at what's going on in Hollywood, where you've had actors that were wanting to boycott. And my thing is, okay, I get what you're saying. However, when you're looking at the end result of something, that's being reactionary. That's the same thing as being reactionary.
It is.
What were you doing before that, before it got to that point? Why weren't you voicing this? And this is something even Whoopi Goldberg talked about. Why are we waiting till now, where the Academy Awards were coming up? Why are they waiting now to have a problem instead of throughout this time talking about the lack of diversity within the Academy Award structure?
I know it's fear. If they stand out, if they're the only one that stand out, they will get shut off. And what is called economical castration. They will be blocked off economically.
But that's the fear we're saying not to have.
Well, it's not to have, but when you can't pay your rent, your bills, and you shut out.
That's the fear-based mindset. And
I understand that, but that's the reason why they are in this position and being reactionary.
Okay, so and then you look at somebody like Nate Parker that took a limb to do a movie like Birth of a Nation that's highlighting Nat Turner. That's a heck of a risk. He went for it and got $17.5 million for it. So either you can remain in that fear and decide that I'm going to stay like this and hope that, people will hear my voice if I'm protesting after the fact. I just don't believe in the protesting after the fact, to boycott after the fact. To me, the message gets lost. Maybe it helps to educate people in the changes, but I don't even agree with the structure that they have for the change. We'll have to talk about that.
Well, he's piggybacking off of Django. He's piggybacking off 12 Years a Slave that was highly successful and made a lot of money.
Well, it's still a big risk because
he
some
had a
people are
backing.
tired of slave movies, as what we've seen in the commentary. So he was able to luckily take a risk on this particular figure, which has been misrepresented throughout history and throughout American history as far as Nat Turner. That's still considered a big risk. So at least Nate Parker took the risk to do it. At least he did that. And I'm saying to Black Hollywood, we'll take the risk. If you don't like the way something's being done, then why not do like what Dr. Woodson say, why can't you produce your own, where it's more inclusive of everyone, where it's more inclusive of the representation of what society represents? And then America is going to eventually have to come around. And that's what Dr. Carter G. Woodson had hoped for, that we wouldn't have to be separate. And one day, maybe that day will come. But until then, there's always a way to get around something. And I think that's the message that we wanted to keep people knowing on our part 1 and part 2 that we did. Started last week and ended with this week. So we hope that this is inspiring in some way. And we didn't have to do the inspirational quotes because we felt that Dr. Carter G. Woodson really had some powerful quotes. Enjoy the rest of your Black History Month, and hopefully you can teach someone else. Have a great week.
When you have credit card debt, the debt suckers' high rate and high pay are everywhere.
Ooh, they're making another minimum payment. Great. Most of the money goes to us. We'll suck the life out of them.
Because your credit card rates are so high, you can't get rid of the debt suckers alone.
Their minimum payments are in vain. No, that's juicy.
But one call to Consolidated Credit can get the debt suckers off your neck.
Thank you for calling Consolidated Credit.
Oh no, they lower his rates and consolidate his bills into one low payment. He'll pay off his debt in no time. Consolidated Credit drives us batty.
Call Consolidated Credit now. Call now and get your life back.
Oh, because debt sucks.
Call now.
Call Consolidated Credit at 1-800-290-3129. 1-800-290-3129. That's 1-800-290-3129. Call now.